Welcome to a new episode of Natureza Oscura, the channel where we reveal the mysteries and curiosities of planet Earth. Imagine a warm morning, August 24, 79 AD. On the coast of modern-day Italy, the city of Pompeii is buzzing with life. It is a jewel of the Roman Empire, a place where the aristocracy rests in luxury villas and gladiators prepare for glory. Mount Vesuvius, that green and fertile mountain crowning the landscape, is seen by everyone as an ancient protector. In fact, Romans didn't even have a word in their vocabulary for volcano. To them, it was just another mountain. But nature always warns before it strikes. Weeks before the tragedy, the earth began to groan. Small tremors, which locals ignored as normal for the region, started to crack the frescoes on the walls. Water wells on the slopes of the mount dried up suddenly, as if something in the depths was sucking away all life. Animals, with that instinct we humans often silence, were restless. Birds stopped singing, and dogs howled at a mountain that, on the outside, still looked harmless. At 1 in the afternoon, time stopped. A deafening explosion, equivalent to hundreds of atomic bombs, tore through the peak of Vesuvius. It wasn't liquid lava that emerged, but something far stranger and more terrifying, a colossal column of ash and pumice stone that shot into the stratosphere, reaching 30 kilometers in height. In a matter of seconds, the brilliant Mediterranean light was devoured by an artificial shadow. Pompeii was plunged into absolute night in the middle of the day. Terrified citizens looked at the sky, unable to understand what was falling upon them. It wasn't rain, it was chunks of volcanic rock, pumice, that began hitting the roofs with a rhythmic and macabre sound. What initially seemed like a geological curiosity became a death trap. The weight of the ash began to accumulate at a rate of 15 centimeters per hour. House doors began to be blocked, and roofs, designed for rain, not for tons of rock, started to creak under unbearable pressure. While some ran toward the port hoping for ships to save them, others made the biggest mistake of their lives, seeking refuge in their homes, trusting that the solid stone walls would protect them from nature's fury. They didn't know that Vesuvius was barely warming up. The air began to fill with sulfur, making every breath difficult, and panic took over the streets where only hours ago peace reigned. The city that never slept was about to fall silent forever. If you were in Pompeii and saw the mountain explode, would you try to flee by sea under a rain of fire, or would you take cover in the safety of your home hoping for the storm to pass? Let us know in the comments, we want to know what you would have done. Barely a few hours have passed since the initial explosion, but for the inhabitants of Pompeii, time seems to have halted in an eternal nightmare. The city is no longer the jewel of the Mediterranean it once was, it is now a labyrinth of shadows, screams, and an oppressive silence broken only by the roar of volcanic lightning. The ash, that gray and lethal snow, already reaches the knees of those trying to flee, turning every step into an exhausting struggle for survival. Meanwhile, across the bay at the naval base of Misenum, a man watches the horizon with a mix of horror and scientific fascination. This is Pliny the Elder, the legendary naturalist and commander of the Roman fleet. Seeing the column of smoke, which he described as a giant pine tree of divine proportions, he makes a decision that will change the course of history. He will not flee from the danger, but sail directly into the heart of the monster to rescue his friends and document the phenomenon. However, the sea has ceased to be an ally. The seabed is rising due to the magma pushing from below, and the waters, once calm, are now boiling and churning with violence. Pliny's ships find themselves bombarded by hot pumice and chunks of charred black rock falling from the sky like incendiary projectiles. Despite his helmsman's pleas to turn back, Pliny utters words that would be engraved forever: "Fortune favors the brave." Inside Pompeii, the situation is desperate. The air is no longer air, it is a dense mixture of fine ash and sulfurous gases that burn the lungs with every breath. Citizens use wet cloths to filter the poison, but the heat is becoming unbearable. The roofs of the houses, burdened with tons of volcanic rock, are beginning to give way. The sound of splintering wood and collapsing stone becomes the city's soundtrack. In the streets, the darkness is so thick that torches fail to pierce more than a meter ahead. People cling to each other's tunics to avoid getting lost in the blackness. They do not know that the worst is yet to come. Vesuvius is about to release its most destructive force, pyroclastic flows, avalanches of incandescent gas that nothing in this world can stop. Hope fades as the mountain prepares for its final blow. Do you think that in a life-or-death situation like this, you would have had Pliny's courage to enter the danger and save others, or would your survival instinct have forced you to get away as fast as possible? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, we want to know what you think. It is now the deep, suffocating middle of the night on August 24, 79 AD. For 12 hours, Pompeii has been under a relentless bombardment of pumice and ash, but the worst is not what has fallen from the sky, it is what is about to race across the ground. To understand the horror of this moment, we must look at the physics of a monster. The eruptive column of Mount Vesuvius, a terrifying pillar of gas and pulverized rock, has reached a staggering height of 30 kilometers. It stands there, a leaning tower of doom, held up only by the sheer force of its own upward momentum. But gravity is a patient executioner. At this precise moment, the internal pressure of the volcano drops. The massive column, weighing millions of tons, becomes too dense for the air to support. In a catastrophic mechanical failure of nature, the column collapses. It doesn't just fall, it folds in on itself and surges down the slopes of the mountain like a tidal wave of liquid fire. These are the pyroclastic flows, the surges, and they are the most lethal weapon in a volcano's arsenal. Imagine a wall of ash, volcanic glass, and toxic gases heated to over 500 degrees. It doesn't move like a cloud, it moves like a heavy, incandescent fluid, hugging the contours of the land, traveling at speeds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour. There is no running from it. There is no hiding. As this first surge screams toward the coast, it hits the town of Herculaneum first. Here, the heat is so intense that the end is not just fast, it is biological annihilation. Forensic evidence found centuries later tells a story that sounds like a horror film. In the stone boat sheds by the shore, where hundreds of people huddled together hoping for a rescue that would never come, the surge hit with the force of a hammer. The temperature was so high that it caused the soft tissues of the victims to vaporize instantly. Their brains reached boiling point in a fraction of a second, causing their skulls to shatter from internal steam pressure. This isn't just a historical event, it is the ultimate demonstration of nature's power to erase the human form. Meanwhile, back in Pompeii, the air has turned into a furnace. The city is already half buried in pumice, but the first surges to reach its walls are slightly cooler, though cool in volcanic terms still means 300 degrees. This is the moment of the eternal instant. As the superheated gas enters the bedrooms of the wealthy and the barracks of the slaves, it triggers a phenomenon known as a cadaveric spasm. You have seen the casts, the famous stone people of Pompeii. They are not statues. They are the hollow spaces left by human beings whose muscles contracted so violently from the thermal shock that they were frozen in their final gestures of life. A mother clutching her child to her chest, her arms locked in a permanent embrace. Two friends holding hands, their fingers intertwined even as the ash turned their world to stone. A man sitting with his head in his hands, a final, silent surrender to the inevitable. As they inhaled, the fine volcanic ash mixed with the moisture in their lungs, creating a thick, caustic cement. They didn't just suffocate, they were sealed from the inside out. Every breath became a struggle against a hardening mask of gray dust. In those final seconds, the darkness was so absolute that the only light came from the terrifying, jagged bolts of volcanic lightning dancing within the ash cloud, a phenomenon caused by the friction of billions of rock particles rubbing together at high speeds. The sheer scale of the energy released is hard to fathom. We are talking about the power of a nuclear explosion occurring every second for hours. The sea itself recoiled. Witnesses from across the bay in Misenum described the ocean retreating from the shore as if the earth were inhaling, leaving sea creatures gasping on the dry seabed, only for a massive wall of water to return as a tsunami. As the sun should have been rising on the morning of August 25, there was no sun. There was only the black rain. The sky was a ceiling of soot. The once vibrant streets of Pompeii, famous for their colorful frescoes and bustling markets, were now beneath 6 meters of volcanic debris. The silence was heavier than the ash. An entire civilization, with its complex laws, its vibrant art, and its deeply human fears, had been deleted from the map. But dark nature teaches us that nature never truly deletes, it preserves. By killing Pompeii so violently and so quickly, the Vesuvio created a time capsule. It protected the bread still in the ovens, the graffiti on the walls, and the very last heartbeat of a city. It is a reminder that we live on a planet that is alive, moving, and occasionally, devastatingly hungry. If you could travel back in time just to leave a warning note 24 hours in advance on the door of a family in Pompeii, do you think they would believe you, or would they think it was just the madness of the gods? Let us know in the comments how you would try to convince them that the mountain was about to devour them. For over 1500 years, the name of Pompeii was erased, not only from maps but almost from the collective memory of humanity. Beneath 6 meters of ash and hardened pumice, an entire civilization slept a dream of stone. What was once a bustling, salt-aired port ended up kilometers away from the coast due to the massive accumulation of volcanic debris. Where there were once cries for help and the terrifying roar of the earth, only the wind remained, whistling over a gray and sterile desert. Time stopped in the year 79 AD, while the outside world kept turning, empires falling and nations being born, without ever suspecting that beneath the peaceful vineyards of Campania lay a treasure of horror and beauty perfectly preserved. The rediscovery of Pompeii was not an act of planned archaeology, but a strange accident of fate. In 1592, during the construction of an underground canal to divert the Sarno River, architect Domenico Fontana unearthed walls covered in vivid frescoes and inscriptions. However, the world was not yet ready for Pompeii. The paintings, often laden with naturalistic Roman life and symbols, were considered scandalous for the era and were covered up once again. The city refused to wake for another 150 years, until 1748, when excavations finally began in earnest under the Spanish Bourbons. What the excavators found was no ordinary archaeological site. It was a snapshot of pure, unadulterated fear. Unlike other ruins of antiquity, where buildings are empty shells eroded by time, Pompeii preserved the mundane details of life, the carbonized bread still in the ovens, the wine dregs in the amphorae, and most strikingly, the empty spaces where flesh and bone once existed. In the 19th century, Giuseppe Fiorelli had a macabre but brilliant idea. He realized these hollow cavities were the negative imprints of decomposed bodies. By filling those hollows with plaster, he returned to the world the physical form of the victims in their final breath. Those figures we see today are not statues, they are the molds of agony, the silent, haunting testimony of a lost battle against the physics of our planet. But dark nature is not just about the tragedies of the past. The true darkness lies in our present. Mount Vesuvius is not a dead monument, it is a resting predator. Since the Great Eruption of 79 AD, it has woken up dozens of times. The 1631 eruption was one of its most violent, claiming thousands of lives, and 1944 marked the last great demonstration of its power during the height of World War II, destroying Allied planes with its grit and fire. Today, Vesuvius is considered the most dangerous volcano in the world, not just because of its explosive history, but because of the millions of people who now call its slopes home. Modern science watches the giant 24 hours a day. Deep within the Vesuvian Observatory, gas sensors, high-precision seismographs, and satellites monitor every subtle deformation of the ground. We know that the magma chamber beneath Vesuvius is filling once again. The question is not if it will explode, but when. Current evacuation plans are a logistical nightmare. Moving over 3 million people in less than 72 hours is a challenge that has never been successfully tested. Vesuvius is a constant reminder of our fragility, a natural beauty that can turn paradise into a hell of ash in a single afternoon. Walking through the silent streets of Pompeii today, one feels as though the city is still whispering. It tells us about human arrogance, the fleeting beauty of daily life, and the cold indifference of nature. The frescoes on the walls of the Villa of the Mysteries still glow with an intense, haunting red, defying the centuries. Meanwhile, on the horizon, the truncated profile of the volcano watches us, reminding us that we are but temporary guests in a world ruled by forces we cannot control. Pompeii is not just a ruin, it is a warning written in stone and ash for all generations to come. After knowing the full story, from the glory of Pompeii to its burial and its current danger, do you think it is reckless for millions of people to continue living at the foot of the volcano, or is it simply the risk we accept for living in the most beautiful places on Earth? Leave us your reflection in the comments below. We at Dark Nature read all your opinions.